Good afternoon, and welcome to the information session for the Winemaking Certificate Program at UC Davis Continuing in Professional Education. My name is Grady Wan, and I am your host today with our program administrator, Katie Candola, is with me. And I'd like to welcome all of you, but I'd also like to check and make sure the technology is working. So if someone could either raise their hand or type a comment in the question and answer button. Oh, it looks like we've got some hands raised, so fantastic. So I appreciate that. Hopefully things are coming through loud and clear. So what we're going to do today is to talk a little bit about the winemaking certificate program and a little bit about the industry in general. And if you have questions along the way, I'd like to ask you to use the Q&A tab at the bottom of your screen. And Katie will collect questions and we will be answering them at the end of the session. So you'll have to wait a little bit for the answers to those questions, but feel free to ask them as we're going along using that Q&A tab. So here's the two of us. As I said, I'm Grady. I'm a longtime commercial winemaker and now instructor and program director for the Winemaking Certificate Program here at UC Davis Continuing in Professional Education. And Katie is the program administrator. She's the one who will handle all enrollments and logistic issues along the way. So we're here to help and hopefully to answer most of your questions about the program. Here's just a little outline as to what to expect. I'm going to talk a few minutes about the industry in general and then talk specifically about the certificate program and the individual classes that are contained in it and how it hopefully might be of benefit to you. So the winemaking is a fantastic industry. I've been fortunate enough to spend the last 30 years, actually 35 now, in the wine industry. And one of the things that I find most attractive about the wine industry is we get to make a really enjoyable product. Usually you get to work in a very beautiful location, and very engaging people are involved in the wine business. So it's a career that combines agriculture and production, science and creativity, logistics and seasonality. You don't get stuck in the same cubicle for all 365 days. You're doing different things in different times of the year. And also, especially in the small winery setting, you are involved in marketing and promotion of your products, both locally and across the country. And if you're like me and you get put in charge of a small winery, you wear very many hats. And you may be involved in things like finance and employee relations as well. So it's a fascinating industry and one that is very difficult to get bored in. And I've enjoyed it immensely, having spent 25 years as a commercial winemaker and now 10 years on the education side. So before we go any further, I'd like to just see where each of you are coming from so we get an idea of our audience. And so if you would be willing to click on one of the radio buttons and tell us where you're from, that would be great. I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that. We generally have a pretty wide range of students, although the program is California-centric, and we do have a lot of California students and those in the Washington and Oregon wine industry as well. We have people from the Okanagan Valley in Canada, across all sections of the United States, as well as areas like Mexico and Europe and elsewhere. So I appreciate you clicking in, and looks like most people have signed in. So I think I'm going to end the poll and share the results. So as you can see, we've got more people from California than anywhere else, but we're also spread out across the rest of the country. And it looks like we've got a couple of participants from Europe as well. So that is fantastic. So glad to have you all with us. So that just leads me to the next slide here. Basically, we have wineries in the United States in all 50 states, and quite a few more than you might expect in some states like maybe Alaska. You wouldn't necessarily expect to see a lot of wineries there. But you can also see from these numbers, both the table, which is from February of last year, and then a couple of comments from a more recent study in July of last year. You can see that the wine industry in the US is dominated by California with over 4,500 wineries, but substantial number of wineries in Oregon, Washington, New York, Texas, Pennsylvania, Virginia, Ohio, and now well represented across the entire United States. So now we have over 10,000 wineries in the US alone. So just a couple of comments about some wine industry trends. Although we've got 10,000 wineries, the top 50 wineries account for more than 90% of the production. So here we've got listed the top 20 wineries, and these names should be fairly familiar, although some of them may not, because a lot of these wineries are conglomerates and have many, many brands underneath their label. So as I mentioned, most of the wineries, most of the production is carried out by the top 50 wineries, but this gives you a breakdown as far as wineries by size. And you can see that although a lot of the wineries do produce a lot of wine, the majority of the wineries are small. In fact, some 96% of the wineries are under 50,000 cases, and 80% of them are below 5,000 cases. So most of the wineries in the United States are small properties and generally producing less than 5,000 cases of wine. On the right-hand side, you can see the bottle price, the average bottle price for wineries, and you can see most of the wineries kind of operate in that mid-range, in the somewhere between $11 and $40 price range per bottle. I included this slide just because although most of us know that Cabernet and Chardonnay are the two dominant varieties in the United States as far as sales and as far as volume goes, it might surprise you to know that the third highest selling variety in the US is Pinot Grigio, or Pinot Gris, followed not too far behind by Pinot Noir. So just another quick poll before we go too much further. Just like to ask you what the, not that one, let's launch the other one. Let's get this one up. Okay. So a question of what drove you to attend today's seminar, so I can get an idea of where your interest is at. We have a wide range of students that take part in our program. A lot of them are already working in the wine business and are just interested in more technical knowledge. That's the first choice there. We have a number of people who have a vineyard and are thinking about starting a winery, or are second career people that are thinking about buying a vineyard or maybe starting a winery in the future. We also have a lot of really fairly large-scale home winemakers that are thinking about going commercial, as well as just some avid consumers that love wine as a product and are interested in more information about winemaking. So a wide range of interests, and it looks as if we're all pretty well represented here as well. So here's the results of that poll. You can see looks like a slim majority are planning to enter the wine industry in the future, but a lot of folks are either already in the wine business operating or thinking about buying a vineyard or starting a winery in the future. So one of the things that always comes up when we talk about the wine industry is, okay, as a career, how much money am I going to make? And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but people don't get into the wine industry for the money, although you can certainly make a good career in the wine business. And I'll give you some indication of that here in this slide, where it lists average winemaker's salary as well as top sales executives based on winery size. You can see generally the higher salaries are with larger wineries, which makes some sense. But as you can see, the average winemaker's salaries fall right just short of $100,000 a year for most small wineries. The larger wineries, which are not represented here, the salaries can be quite a bit higher. I also listed occupations such as vineyard manager, office manager, tasting room manager, et cetera, so you can get an idea of the general salary range. If we look specifically at smaller wineries, that is smaller than 50,000 cases a year, and strictly looking at production employment slots, you can see that winemakers are the highest paid of the group, as makes most sense. They have the most responsibility. Assistant winemakers in the $75,000 range as an average, and then enologist, which is usually someone working in the laboratory or involved in the lab management side of things, as well as cellar master and cellar workers at a lower level. So now I want to talk about our audience. I've mentioned that we have students from all over the country and frankly all over the world with a wide variety of interests and in situations, but you should keep in mind that the winemaking certificate program is designed for those that are interested primarily in production winemaking. That's not to say that it won't be useful for other people. I always feel like the people that I met in winery sales or in the winery administration were much better off if they understood more about what went on in the cellar as far as production winemaking. But the courses are designed around trying to give you the science behind the art of winemaking and designed for those in commercial production. So the focus of the program is to allow our students to pursue their passion for winemaking. We try to take the academic information, the science and technical background, and put it into a practical setting. So yes, we want to understand the chemical and microbiological processes involved in winemaking and understand their ramifications, but we also want to understand how these concepts play out in the real winery setting. So we do strive to have our instructors all having extensive commercial experience so that you can see how the science actually works in a winery setting. And the goal is really to try to provide enough information to help you make better winemaking decisions. We also have some information about the growing of quality wine grapes, which are critical to producing quality wine. And obviously, what we would like to see is everybody's career being advanced by the addition of this technical knowledge. So the focus of the winemaking certificate program is winemaking and wine production. It's based on the UC Davis Viticulture and Enology science-based curriculum here on campus. We hire quality instructors with extensive commercial winery experience. This, as I said, is key because we really want to, all of our students want to understand how this science really works in the winery setting. So you get the practical application of the academic information, and it is an online course, an online series of courses, so it's accessible from anywhere in the world that has internet access, a flexible course path. After the first courses, you can choose what is of most of interest to you, so you can get through the 5 courses. And one of the major advantages of the program is the networking opportunities that it allows, both with instructors that you'll get a chance to meet and interact with, but also with the students that take place in the program. You'll meet students from, as I said, all over the country and literally all over the world that are doing something similar to you, and you'll be able to keep in touch with them after the fact, and that networking can prove invaluable. So one of the questions that people often ask us is, so if we go through the certificate program, how is it going to benefit me in my career path? And yes, we have had some certificate graduates go directly into winemaking positions, but that's not the normal pathway. Those that get winemaking positions directly after finishing their certificate are usually already connected to a family winery operation, and they basically were learning the technical side so they can move directly into that position for their family. Or they're starting their own winery operation. Usually they've been a home winemaker for a number of years and are going to go commercial, and they can take that certificate and go directly into the program. It also has worked for some folks that are outside of the California, Washington, Oregon wine industry, which tends to be more competitive for qualified, trained, technical winemakers. So in other areas, you may find opportunities that can arise with a certificate. But it is not the same as a BS degree in fermentation science from UC Davis, and as a result does not have the same gravitas in the wine industry in general. Graduates in the program typically advance faster than they otherwise would because they have more technical knowledge and are able to use that in their jobs. But graduates from the program that are outside the industry usually have to kind of work their way up from a production job and work their way into a decision-making role as a winemaker. So yes, it gives you the knowledge, but in the end, the wine industry is first and foremost an experiential industry, so nothing really takes the place of that hands-on experience of actually working in a winery setting. So to that end, I thought I'd throw in a slide just about if you were looking to get into the wine industry from outside the industry, when you might find the most success. And as you can see from the winery job postings chart that's shown here, generally most of the jobs get posted somewhere in that March, April, May range. So these are wineries that are generally looking for people to add to their staff for the upcoming harvest, which is usually August, September here in California. And So they're trying to get their prospective employees in place so that they can start usually in July or the beginning of August and get the training they need before the first grapes come in. So if you're looking for a production job, the timing right now is pretty good from the standpoint of usually it's a springtime is the best job market, and the worst job market is usually right after harvest, and people are cutting down staff after the grapes have all been processed, as opposed to hiring new personnel. So a few other recommendations as far as getting into the wine industry from the outside, in addition to timing, try to get ahead of the hiring curve. So you really would like to contact wineries before they're already filling their slots. So I like the early springtime to contact employees. I would target wineries whose wines you enjoy. Contact the winemaker that makes wines that you like and express your interest in their product and that you would like to help them out if there's an opportunity arises. Explain your interest and background and see if you can get hired on. Often wineries will hire people in a temporary position for the harvest and planning for them to work August, September, October, November, and then be released as a part-time employee. But those larger wineries, medium-sized wineries, will generally keep the better performing of their harvest interns on as full-time staff after the harvest. So while they may let most of their part-time staff go at the end of harvest, often they will keep one or two people on as full-time staff afterwards. So that's a good way to get that experience. The other thing I might mention, especially that's not available, wasn't available to me when I was getting into the wine business in 1980, but is much more available now, is the ability to do multiple harvests in a year. The connection that many wineries have with wineries in the Southern Hemisphere, in either Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, Argentina, Chile, can allow you to do a fall harvest here in the Northern Hemisphere. And even if you were a temporary harvest worker for the fall harvest and released of your duties at the end of November, you perhaps can travel, if you're interested in doing that, to the Southern Hemisphere and get a second harvest experience in the same calendar year. So great opportunities to keep in mind. I also like the idea of hiring on in a small winery setting, because generally in a harvest internship position, you'll get a much more varied experience and probably have the opportunity to interact with the winemaker a little bit better than in a larger winery setting. So now on to the certificate program itself. As I mentioned, it's a series of 5 quarter-long courses, 10 or 11 weeks. Generally takes about 2 years to complete. Not all courses are available every quarter, and usually most students don't want to take 5 classes in a row because they have another life, often a full-time job, and so it's difficult for them to do so. So some students might want to take 1 course a year, and it takes them 5 years to go through the program. But most people are interested in getting through the program as quickly as possible, and usually that's roughly about a 2-year setting. The costs for their programs are given here. The introductory course, which is basically just the introduction to wine and winemaking, is at a lower cost, but the remaining 4 are $2,000 each, and so the total cost is shown here. You can take the introductory course separately, that is separate from the rest of the certificate program, but the program itself involves all 5 courses. So here's the titles of the courses. We have an Introduction to Wine and Winemaking, as I mentioned, the general introductory course, followed by a wine production course, which basically looks at fermentation and the sort of early stages of wine production. After taking the wine production course, you can take any of the remaining 3 courses in any order that you are able or you desire. There's a quality control and analysis course that also has microbiology included. It's a viticulture for winemaking course because often in the small winery setting, winemakers, I experienced this, get responsibility for the quality of the wine grapes. And I didn't have any training in viticulture, so we tried to give people an idea of the science of growing quality wine grapes, because that's a critical element in producing fine wines. And the final course is wine stability and sensory analysis that looks at the chemical issues around shelf life and stability of our products. So logistically, you need to apply to the certificate program before registering for the wine production course. As I mentioned, you can take the introductory course without being part of the certificate program. But if you're interested in the program, you need to apply for the, apply to Katie to get into the program. So there's a requirement of 1 semester of college chemistry, because there is chemistry involved, and we found that people without a chemistry background really struggle. So the wine production class generally has a short 3 to 6 month wait list after you get accepted into the program, and then you get invited to enroll in the next available class. And as I mentioned, the last 3 classes can be taken in any order, and we will try to work with you to design a program that works best for you individually. I mentioned that the program requires some basic chemistry, and so you need to have some level of understanding. It benefits students to have not just an understanding of general chemistry, though, also some introduction to biological and organic chemistry. For those who haven't had sufficient science in their background, or it's been a long, long time since you've taken college chemistry, there are several options. Obviously, you can go to a local community college, and if you head that direction, we recommend that you take a chemistry course that's designed for the health sciences. But if you'd like to take an online version, we have just introduced a new basic chemistry for winemakers course that is currently in its 2nd week of its inaugural offering. And I am teaching that course, but it is available, will be offered again in the summer. And I'd like to spend a couple minutes talking about that class in case you might need some chemistry refresher. So this basic chemistry for winemakers course is a general biological and organic chemistry introduction. It does have a winemaking emphasis, but it is not a wine chemistry course per se, as it's not really focused on wine chemistry. It's more giving you general background that will be useful when we discuss wine chemistry. So it's a 12-week course done entirely online, designed specifically as a prerequisite for this program. It's based on Karen Kimberlake's text, General Organic and Biological Chemistry, Structures of Life, which was just a new edition, just printed last year with its companion online tools. It has the first half of the course, a little over half of the course, is general chemistry, where these are some of the topics that we'll look at. We'll look at some of the basic math skills that are necessary for chemistry and for winemaking. We'll talk about matter and atomic theory, nuclear chemistry and chemical bonds, chemical reactions and the mole, not the furry critter that burrows under the ground, but the chemist's mole. We look at gases, solutions and reaction rates, acid and base chemistry, and that'll get us through most of the general chemistry topics. Weeks 8 through 10 look at primarily organic molecules, and although this is an area that's not often covered in a general chemistry class. But wine is made up of organic compounds, from ethanol to tartaric acid to phenolic compounds. And without at least an introduction to organic chemistry, often our students will struggle. So we'll spend a couple weeks looking at the basic ideas of organic chemistry, the basic functional groups, and talk a little bit about carboxylic acids, esters, and amino acids. And then we will talk briefly about some biological chemistry topics, looking at proteins and enzymes and some of the metabolic pathways, so you can understand how these compounds are related in the wine matrix, how grapes form some of these compounds, and then how they impact our resulting wines. The last week we will talk about wine making specific topics that are related to chemistry, so you can see how some of these general concepts will play into the wine world. So doesn't go into a lot of detail, but you'll see how some of the the chemistry concepts that we talked about in the first 11 weeks of the course play out in the winery setting. So again, here's the 5 courses, and I want to talk just a couple minutes about the logistics of each of them. They're administered 100% online. They're accessible to you at your convenience. All course materials come through the class websites, a series of resources available to you as far as lectures that are recorded that you can listen to, textbook readings, downloadable reading materials, and at least for the upper level courses, they're limited to 40 students, and the instructor will have some live chat sessions weekly or at least bi-weekly that you can interact with them directly. So the intro course, traditionally offered all 4 quarters, and animated lectures are done by the UCD professors, and assessments done by a midterm and final that are both closed book and multiple choice tests. Here's some of the topics that are talked about in the introductory course, a little bit of history of the wines in major wine and wine growing regions around the world. Get the basic fundamentals of the winemaking process as well as the grape growing process. A few wine and health issues, interpreting a wine label, and some basics about wine tasting. As I mentioned, the rest of the courses are much more interactive and involve quite a bit more work. You can expect to put usually 8 to 10 hours a week in these programs for each of these courses, and they involve both recorded lectures, readings from the text and the ASEB technical journal. Student interaction is through threaded discussions with your peers, as well as the professor or the instructor, and live webinar sessions for Q&A and practical tips included as well. The assessments are also quite a bit different in the sense that they are all open book assignments, and they're more of a case study format where you're given a problem or a situation and have to solve it based on the information that's given. So here's a couple of topics in the wine production course. It does look at grape composition and ripening, grape sampling, and grape and must processing in the early stages of the winemaking process. And then it's especially focused on the alcoholic fermentation and malolactic fermentations that take place early on in the wine's life. We'll conclude with some cellar operations and wine stability, but those topics are covered in more detail in one of the later courses. The QC class looks at the scientific method and talks a little bit about dimensional analysis, laboratory design. As I mentioned, it does have microbiology, so you look at microorganisms and the microbiological techniques that are involved in assessing their situation. and basic quality control analysis theory, technique, and application. So you'll learn what gets measured and how it's useful in winemaking. As I mentioned, the Viticulture and Winemakers course is primarily a primer for production winemakers to learn something about the technology involved in producing quality wine grapes. So we go into the technical side of soils and viruses, diseases, pruning and water relations, nutrition, vine balance, and vineyard development considerations. And lastly, the wine stability and sensory analysis class looks at the stability of wines, things like potassium bitartrate stability, protein stability, as well as color stability. Talks a little bit about the components, the contributions of oak barrels, and then we talk about both sensory physiology and sensory testing methods. So the goal of the program is to learn about world wine production and appreciation, but primarily to learn those things that are important in making quality winemaking decisions. So you'll learn about the growing of quality wine grapes. You'll learn about a systematic and scientific approach to winemaking and purchasing decisions. You learn the principles and mechanisms of sensory analysis, and with that, the major faults and that you need to be aware of as you're producing wines. And the fundamental principles of analytical chemistry and microbiology are also included. It's not as in-depth as the degree program on campus, but our goal is to try to condense it into a program that is manageable and gives you the important facts that are critical to producing quality wines, while also giving you the some practical tips from commercial winemakers as to how it actually plays out in the real world. So that's a quick overview of our program, and hopefully it's answered most of your questions. But I'd also like to take the next few minutes and answer any additional questions that you might have. So I'll give people an opportunity to pose those questions and get them over to Katie, and I'll see if she has any already for me.
There is one question where the student wants to know, does the chemistry class need to be taken prior to Intro to Winemaking course?
It does not. It has to be taken before you're accepted into the program, but you can certainly take the introductory course first, and you could be taking the chemistry simultaneously at a community college if you so desire. So.
Okay, the next question is, the student is saying, I have a background education in agricultural engineering, a part-time postgraduate course in enology, and 19 years of experience as assistant winemaker. The postgraduate was a bit of deception because there were many students that had a different background, lawyers, international relations. And so they downgraded the contents and didn't go too deep in some scientific aspects. I want to scientifically go deep. Does this program allow me to do that?
It's somewhat hard for me to say because I don't know how much depth you are looking for. I do know that the instructors are capable of going basically as deep into the science as you would like. And so even if the program structure does not cover the material in as much depth as you personally might want, that information is certainly available. One of the nice things about the program and the latter 4 courses, which are limited to 40 students per session, is there's a lot of opportunity for interaction between students and the instructor. And what we have found is basically you can get as much information as you desire out of that format.
Okay, another question. Is their enrollment open year-round?
Their Classes are open all year round. There are classes available all 4 quarters of the calendar year. However, not all courses are available every quarter. So one has to choose a pathway that allows you to get through the program in the time frame that you desire. So Katie would be happy to work with you to allow that to happen.
Okay, next one is, if a student has a WSET certificate, will we waive course 1?
And the answer to that is probably yes. The introductory course can be waived with either comparable academic courses already taken or industry experience. So contact Katie and she will be happy to make that more clear.
Okay. Does the basic chemistry course need to be taken or completed before a student can apply for the certificate program?
Run that one by again.
Does the basic chemistry course need to be completed before a student can apply to the winemaking certificate program?
And basically you can apply to the program beforehand, but you won't be allowed to enroll into the wine production course until you have satisfied that chemistry prerequisite.
Okay. Is the text included in the fee for the intro class?
There is no text in the intro class, so I guess the answer is it's not applicable.
Okay. And the next question is, are there any practical experiments to be done? If yes, how? The student lives in Europe.
There's no practical side required in any of the courses. It's a 100% online program. However, for those students that happen to be in Northern California, there are opportunities for interaction in vineyard and wineries on occasion, depending upon the instructor's availability and the timing. So nothing is required for any of the classes. It is all 100% online, but there are some opportunities allowed. And the UC Davis Continuing and Professional Education does offer other courses, weekend intensive classes and one-day courses that give you more hands-on experience.
Do you recommend gaining hands-on experience in production winemaking before enrolling in the certificate program? If so, how much?
It is not necessary to have any winery experience beforehand, although a lot of the students that are in each course will already have winery experience. So in some ways, I know some of the students in the past have felt intimidated by people that have more winery experience because, if they don't have any. But it's not required, and we found that even students that don't have winery experience benefit greatly from the program, and once they get over their own insecurity, they're able to interact with students and instructor on a very productive basis.
Okay, next question. For the last 3 courses in the program, is there a preferred order?
The way that we had originally set it up was to do the wine production course followed by the QC course and then the viticulture course and then finishing up with the wine stability and sensory analysis course. The students in the past have wanted some flexibility, so we had granted that. There is no real reason why one course has to be taken before the others, but some students have commented that they would have preferred to take QC before the wine stability course. The viticulture course is kind of outside of the production realm. So,
okay. Is the text included in any of the class fees, or should the students buy them separately?
The students will need to buy the text separately. This can be either an online access or e-text or a hard copy of the book. The primary text used for the program is Ron Jackson's Wine Science 4th edition, which is about to be updated. I think the 5th edition is just coming out. So we will probably switch to that in the coming year.
Okay, post completion of the program, would the courses have any transferability to your traditional enology program?
The answer to that is no, they are not. The courses are not directly, do not directly coincide, so they cannot be transferred to the UC Davis program.
Okay, how difficult is Vit 259, which is the basic chemistry for winemakers class, if you don't have any chemistry background?
Actually, that's who the class is designed for. It's an introduction to chemistry and also organic and biological chemistry from the idea that you're starting from scratch. So it's designed to give you some exposure to the basic chemistry you will need for the program.
And how much is the basic chemistry class?
The enrollment fee is $599, and it includes the access to the e-text and the online resources.
Okay, next question is, I have a WSET level 3 certificate. Is that helpful?
Certainly it would be helpful, and probably, I'm not saying that you wouldn't still benefit from the program, but certainly that as a background would be a great help.
Okay, next question. Is the topic of food safety law covered?
Food safety law. Not, I would say no. There is a little bit of the legal restrictions around wine production introduced, but not as far as food safety goes.
Okay, so that's all the questions we have.
Okay, I'll give just a couple more minutes. I'd also like to just thank you for the opportunity to talk with you about the program. And I think that Katie will put a little chat in the message box with her email address, so you can contact her directly if you have any further questions, or you can contact us through the website. We would be happy to answer them. But with that, thank you for attending. And Katie, if you want to.
And I'm looking forward to talking to you either on the phone or by email. Have a great day.